party people, what's going on? Space Cowboy here. Welcome back to the channel with another video for you guys today. Before we get started with today's video, please make sure to leave a like. It's been helping the channel out a lot, so please make sure to continue to do so. Also, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe to get more Dallas Cowboys content from yours truly now and in the future. And finally, make sure to hit the notification bell to be notified when I go live or post new content. So, I wanted to expand my talk to the entire NFC East and just give my projection on how each team is going to do and honestly who I think is going to win the NFC East in 2020. Now, I've already done a live stream talking about it, and I went on, an in-depth analysis of statistics, how each team's offseason went, and this, that, and the third, and more or less just talked about that. But I wanted to kind of make that shorter and just a little bit more palatable so you guys don't have to watch an hour-long video of me talking about statistics and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each team from 4th place to 1st place on who I think is going to be where and just explain my rationale and just go through their schedule and who I think they might struggle with, this, that, and the third. So there's that. Down below in the comment section, feel free to put who you think is going to do well, who you think is going to do well, which teams you think are going to be 1st, 4th. Put that down below. I want to see what you guys have to say. So let's start off with 4th place. With 4th place, I have the Washington Redskins. I think that right now the Redskins are a bit in a state of flux. Now, it really comes down to how Ron Rivera puts this team together, number 1, and number 2, how well Dwayne Haskins improves in year 2. I think that Dwayne Haskins got thrown into the fire a bit early last year, and, he had games where he looked pretty good, but I think it really comes down to, can they get pieces around him to play well? Yeah, they have guys on the offensive side of the ball that can definitely play well, and I think that if they can really continue to do well and they keep them around for the sake of their quarterback, I think that they're on the right track. However, I will say this. I think that the Redskins are not a team that's going to reach the playoffs yet, but based off of how they've been drafting and based off of how they've been getting pieces in, I think they're on the right track. But again, we don't know because last year was a bit of a wash because, you had Jay Gruden, he got fired, and then you had all this other stuff happening where basically the team just looked very lethargic, okay? Now, I think they're going to be as bad as they were in 2019. I don't think so. Based off of their schedule, it's the 5th easiest schedule in terms of records, but this is who I think they might struggle against. Now, I think they might struggle against the Eagles twice. I think that they'll struggle against Arizona, Cleveland, Baltimore, the Rams, the Giants twice, the Cowboys twice, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, and Seattle. Now, I'm not implying they're going to lose all of those games, but assuming they lost all of those games, that would put them at a 3-13 record. Now, do I think they're going to go 3-13? Absolutely not. If you take a look at it, and let's say they're lucky and they win maybe half of those games, that could put them at a 9-7 record if things bounce their way. Do I think they're going to go 9-7? No, I really don't think so. I think that it really comes down to 2 massive points. Does Ron Rivera get the most out of this roster for what it is right now, and can he help improve Dwayne Haskins as a quarterback? Ron Rivera has his experience in Carolina. He's taken his team to a Super Bowl. He's had success there, so it's not like he's an absolute garbage head coach, but we're going to see how he meshes with the roster he has now. So we'll see that. Now, if you're asking me for my honest prediction of where I think they're going to be, I think they're going to be at a 6-10 record. I have them pegged between 3-7 wins at, the worst and best. And that's if, if things go well. And if they get lucky, maybe get to 8-8. But with all that in mind, I think that Washington, based off of the roster, they're on the right track. But do I think they're at, that contention status to where they can make the playoffs? Not yet. So in 3rd place, we have the New York Giants, in my opinion. So the Giants had the 7th easiest schedule of the bunch, or rather in the entire NFL. And when I look at this team with the Giants, I think that the Giants they've been a very bad team over the past couple seasons. Ever since 2016, the team has not done well at all. And they've been picking really in the top 10 ever since. Now, I understand they got new management. I understand that they got a new coach. They brought in some guys. And they got a new quarterback. So there's a lot of question marks surrounding this Giants team. Now, when it comes to teams that I think they might struggle against, I see them struggling against Pittsburgh, San Francisco, could be Dallas twice, Philadelphia, Seattle, Arizona, Cleveland, and Baltimore. Now, if they were to lose all of those games, that would put them at a 7-9 record, which isn't bad. I mean, that I think is probably where I would grade the Giants right now, because again, it's the moving parts. They got a new head coach. They're going to bring in, they got Jason Garrett in with the offensive coordinator, and we're going to see how well he does with Daniel Jones. I would say it's very similar to that of the situation with the Washington Redskins. I think that it really comes down to how well their coach does, and honestly, if the talent of their roster comes together, they have key pieces like Saquon Barkley, and they have also some guys on that roster, offensively speaking, where they can get some number. They got, a guy in Darius Slayton, and then you got Golden Tate. They got some solid weapons there, but I think it really comes down to how well Daniel Jones does. Does he improve his fumbling problem? He really needs to do that, because he can't be fumbling the ball a whole lot, number one. And number two, I really think it just comes down to how well their offensive line plays. If their offensive line plays as bad as it was last year, I don't think they're going to really do much. But if they, considering they spent a 4th overall pick on a tackle in Andrew Thomas, I think that they're definitely going to improve. And that's no question about that. I think they're going to improve. Now, if you were to ask me, well, first, if they were to win half of the games that I mentioned, if they were to lose all of them, that would put them at a 10-6 record, okay? And so what is my projection for them? I think they're 7-9. I think that they're a 7-9 squad. I think that they are also slightly on the right track, but it really comes down to if they can continue with pace and if Joe Judge isn't complete trash. Obviously, he's coming from the Bill Belichick tree, and typically coaches that come from that tree are not good. So it really comes down to how well this team does under this new coaching staff, and if if the roster can continue to improve. I could see them winning between 6, maybe upwards to 9 games if they're lucky. And I don't think that's unrealistic to look at. Look, I know that the Giants and Redskins have been basement dwellers in the NFC East, but I would say that the NFC East typically has these weird years where a team that you think isn't going to do as good typically tends to do better than what you expect. But, and this is assuming no one gets hurt too. So I think that at this point, I think that the Giants will, be in 3rd place, but they won't be just outright trash. In 2nd place, we got the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, people might say, oh, you're biased because you want the Cowboys to win the East. But just allow me to explain why I think the Eagles will come in 2nd place. Now, to start off, they have the 8th easiest schedule. They have the hardest schedule out of the entire NFC East in 2020. That's number 1. Now, it is the 8th easiest. I'm not saying that it's complete, it's going to be, super hard. No, that's not what I'm implying here. But they do have the toughest schedule when you look at the entire NFC East. That is something to keep in mind. Another thing to keep in mind, they also, yes, they are de facto the favorite. Why? Because they have the, this longest tenure head coach in the NFC East at this point in time, considering the other 3 teams have new head coaches. They just made the playoffs last year, and it just comes down to, I guess, it just comes down to them just winning it last year, honestly. Then that's the only reason I see them being pegged as favorites, which I think is kind of stupid, because honestly, the Eagles haven't really done much other than see very key pieces walk in free agency, but more importantly, yeah, they signed some key pieces here and there, and their draft wasn't horrible, but I think that the Eagles they did enough to keep themselves afloat, but to make them a true championship contender, I don't think they did enough. And I'm being completely honest there. When I look at their schedule, I could see them struggling against teams like the 49ers, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Seattle, New Orleans, Arizona, and maybe the Cowboys once. I think they're going to split with the Cowboys for context, and also I think that the Giants might give them fits one of these games. But there is a possibility they could sweep them again because they have their number. But if they were to lose all the games that I mentioned, that would put them at an 8-8 record, which isn't bad considering this roster. I think the Eagles are going into a light rebuild, but honestly, if you're the Eagles and you continuously have to pick at the upper end of the draft, or the lower end of the draft, I guess, if you want to put it that way, I think that is not good, especially when you look at their roster in the last couple of drafts they've had. The last couple of drafts they've had, they haven't really done well. and I think that that's going to impact them. I had a conversation with Philly 500, and we talked about, look, if they don't hit on this draft in 2020, they're not going to do well in 2020. And what I mean is they're not going to go where they want to go. Now, if they were to win half of the games that I mentioned, that would put them at a 12-4 record. And I can see this team for the Eagles going between 8 to 11 wins. I have them pegged at a 9-7 record once again. And this is no knock on the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that the biggest issue is that they don't want to get complacent, and I think that's what I'm worried about if you're an Eagles fan. I don't really care because I'm a Cowboys fan. I hope that they go 0-16. But the one thing I would be worried about is, as an Eagles fan, is they get complacent, okay? And I think when you look at it, I think that the Eagles are doing just enough to keep themselves afloat, but I don't see any moves that put them over the top. They do have a solid offensive line. I think they have solid weapons to work with Wentz, but it really comes down to how well those weapons work. Number one, can Wentz stay upright, which I think he can. And more so, how does this defense look without Malcolm Jenkins? So there's a ton of factors that go into this, okay? And also, can Doug Peterson, as the main play caller, do his, can he help the Eagles out? But yeah, I think that the Eagles will come in second place. They can vie for a playoff spot, I think, and I think they might get that 7th playoff spot if all things go well, but it comes down to how the other teams in the NFC do. So, yeah, I have the Eagles at 9-7 and in second place, and finally I have the Dallas Cowboys winning the East in 2020. Now, my fundamental belief is that it is the Cowboys' division to lose in 2020. Why is that? They have the best roster, or rather the most talented roster out of the entire NFC East, in my opinion. I think that if their coach in Mike McCarthy can really do as well as, I believe he can, and as well as he did in Green Bay in terms of the resume he's crafted there, they could possibly have the best head coach in the division if all things go well. The Cowboys have been drafting extremely well over the past couple seasons. Yes, they've had a couple misses, but when you look at how they've done, I think that they could have done a bit better in free agency when it came to a couple years. But overall, the Cowboys have done very well when it comes to drafting. When you look at the pieces that are in place, they have a very, very, very deadly offense if all things work out. I think that there are some question marks around the offensive line. When you lose a guy in Travis Frederick, that's a huge, that's a huge blow to your offensive line. However, if the offensive line can stay upright and it can at least let Dak Prescott do his job, I think that the Cowboys can win somewhere between 9 to 12 games. And that's not unrealistic to think of. Now, I think teams they might struggle against are the Seattle Seahawks, the Eagles, Minnesota, Baltimore, San Francisco, Arizona, and Pittsburgh. They have the third easiest schedule and the easiest schedule out of the entire NFC East. If they were to lose all those games, that would put them at a 9-7 record, which isn't bad. And I think that if they win half of those games, they can go 12-4. So I think it really comes down to, can the Cowboys put it all together, right? This has been the biggest question. They couldn't do it under Jason Garrett, but can they do it under a new guy and a new leadership and stuff like that? In terms of record-wise, I think that the Cowboys will go 11-5 in 2020. I think that they are definitely going to do a hell of a lot better than they did last year in terms of record, and I think that their offense will do just as good or maybe better statistically speaking. And their defense, I think, has a lot of question marks as well, but if they can get things to mesh together, there's no reason or no rationale to say that the Cowboys can't win the East in 2020. The only thing that's stopping them is themselves, and I think that you're kidding yourself in thinking that the Cowboys are a bad team. Look, the Cowboys have the most talented roster in the division, and that's not even... And what I mean by talented, I mean that the ceiling is way higher than other teams. That's not crazy to say, right? I would say that the defense is questionable, but their offense, I think, is good enough to really supplant that. So, with all that in mind, I really do think that the Cowboys will win the East in 2020. So, to kind of final recap, I have the Redskins in 4th at 6-10, with a window of 3 to 7 wins. I have the Giants in 3rd place with a 7-9 record with a window of 6 to 9 wins. And then I have the Eagles in 2nd place with a 9-7 record with a window of 8 to 11 wins. And I finally have the Dallas Cowboys in 1st place with a record of 11-5 with a window of 9 to 12 wins. So yeah, I really do think that this is going to be an interesting year for the East to see how each of these teams do. It's a very big wild card division. We don't know how some of these new teams, the new coaches and all this other stuff are going to do. So yeah, I think that that's my honest prediction, and I'm gonna, just write my name on it and say like, hey, this is who I think's going to do well in this, that, and the third. So down below, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the like button. Also subscribe if you're new here, and hit the notification bell. And down in the comment section, tell me who you think's going to win the East in 2020. I'm really interested to hear that. So with all that in mind, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys later. Peace out, guys. Bye bye.